Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our Developing Great Recruitment Messaging, and that will attract lots of wonderful volunteers to your entities and your organizations. I'm Melissa Sherry, and I'm the Volunteer Impact Coordinator here at the Commission. And I am joined today by Katie Alexander. Katie, could you say hi and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Alexander, and I'm an AmeriCorps Vista here. Today, I'll be monitoring the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in there, and we're glad you guys are here.
I couldn't do this without Katie. She just helps everything run very smoothly. So with that, we'll go ahead and we'll jump right into it. So here's our objectives for today's session. First of all, we're going to talk about why messaging matters. Your message is at the heart of your recruitment campaign and your recruitment initiatives. We're going to talk about three basic motivations for volunteering, and then we're going to talk about how you can align your needs with the motivations of potential volunteers. And of course, we're going to talk about crafting a strong recruitment message. And then we're going to talk about some advanced strategies for targeting and a segmentation of your population before you go out and you try
Mhm.
a recruitment
I'm
campaign.
listening to a Master Gardener class.
Oh, sorry. Uh, Katie, could you mute her, please? Sorry about that, everyone. And then we're gonna share some implementation ideas. So we're really glad that you're here. And to get into it, we'll just start talking about why that messaging matters in the first place. So statistically, organizations with a strong messaging see up to a 50% higher retention rate. And that really does make sense. Really, people are attracted to a cause, not an organization. They may come in for lots of reasons, but the basic reason why they respond is it touched them and it responded to a motivation, a need, a problem, a challenge that they had, and you were the solution. So a strong messaging uh, it does see a higher retention. And then, just so you know, did you know that 30% of volunteers say they never heard back from an organization after expressing interest? And that is just a gut check for all of us that I used to hear this so much when I ran the volunteer center. It was like the bane of my existence. I hated that. I would find an awesome volunteer and I knew this organization had a need and I'd connect them and then I'd find out that something happened. They just fell through the cracks. The organization wasn't going to follow up with them right away, things like that. So volunteers need to hear back right away. And when I was doing this, when I was running a volunteer program, we had a promise that we kept to ourselves that a volunteer would hear back from us within 24 hours. And over the weekend, obviously that's not always possible, but business days. So make sure that you do what I call strike when the iron's hot. The volunteer is hot when they at first express interest. Be ready for them. Be ready in your volunteer recruitment. Have your processes ready. Know how they're going to flow through and what the next step is for them. And so then the other thing is clear messaging reduces mismatched expectations. I can tell you, I have worked with some problem volunteers that I did not bring into the organization. But when this happened, almost always there were not clear expectations. I remember one time I was working with a group and they brought in a professional, and it was a pretty well-known professional. And they thought that this person was going to teach them everything that she knew. And she thought that she was running the show. And so, right from the beginning, there were challenges. And as we kind of delved into this, I said, okay, here's the root of the problem. You didn't have a clear expectation for this person. You need to have it in writing. People need to hear it multiple times. And in messaging, this is not in my notes, it's just a side note that for people to act, it's generally they need to hear something about 7 times before it resonates with them and they realize that it includes them and that it's an important thing for them to hear. But if she had seen it, written it, it had been talked about, it had been explained right from the onset, this never would have happened. It was a little egg on some of our faces for this, but we were able to clarify those expectations. I think the damage was a little bit already done just because you want to have everyone start off on the right foot. And it's a lot easier to do it that way than to take the painstaking steps of repairing a relationship. But I'll get off my soapbox. So that's why messaging matters. And then to realize on the onset of things that volunteers have so many choices. There's so much noise out there from our phones, social media, our own hobbies, our families, our jobs, all these things. And then all the things that where we think we should be spending our time and we're not, those kind of things. Plus, then you throw in volunteering. How does anyone have the time to do that? So you're with that in mind, they have choices. There's lots of places they could volunteer. There's lots of places they can serve. I was looking at where you're from. You have phenomenal organizations. You have phenomenal stories in your organization. You have phenomenal opportunities for people to grow and learn and have a place of belonging. We just have to get the message out. So our messages do need to stand out. They need to speak to the volunteers' motivations. They need to align with their values. They need to compete with all those other priorities that that person has in their life. And it needs to make a clear impact. Nowhere in that did it say, we need a volunteer to sit at the desk from this time to this time because somebody needs to go to lunch. Yeah, yes, we have needs, but in a recruitment messaging, it's not about our needs. It's about our opportunities that we're giving them, opportunities that we're giving them to do something bigger and better for themselves. Oops, I went one ahead. Okay, so when you're thinking about the motivations, there's basically 3 motivations. And I know I've talked about this in different ways, but they basically meld down to this for the simple purposes of making your recruitment planning easier. People are either purpose driven, social driven, or growth driven. And if you can think about the people that volunteer with you now, where are they? They're probably a smattering of all of those. But what is it that, according to age, probably an older population is purpose driven and social driven. Um, People my age can be purpose driven. They can be growth driven, maybe social driven as well. But so they can go in between each. But generally speaking, I think if you think about who you need, and what that need is that person going to be purpose driven, social driven, or growth driven? I'm going to tell you a story about my brother. I have a brother who is an engineer and he's a mechanical engineer and he is like we are so far apart. It is just crazy. He could never work in nonprofit. He could never just get on here and just talk to you. It has to be boom, boom, boom. And I think about things like if I were to let me give you an example. We had a thrift shop in one of the places that I worked in the past. It was a fun little place. People loved to come in. They had their regulars. They had the volunteers just stayed forever. They loved working with each other. It was a great little place to go. And I think about like the people that go in there and that how they connected with the volunteers. And then I think about like, what if I put my brother in the middle of that? My brother would be all business. No, this is what we need. We need goals. We need this. We need that. We need to be able to have, you know, this right here, all the pots and pans right here, all the shirts right here, all the socks right here, all the pictures right here. And he wouldn't be interested in that social. He would be interested in organizing it and being very purpose driven. So you think about that when you find somebody who wants to do something, but it doesn't seem like it's like, why? Why would you want to go there? I think listen to your gut. I also think about people who come in and they want to. We had, for example, we had people who love to hold babies. And sometimes I would get someone who would want to come in, and it's lovely to hold babies. I'm not saying it's not, but it's very purpose driven as well, very controlled. Things have to be done a certain way. If you were never trained on doing that, don't do it. We had to be very, very careful, not only for infection prevention reasons, safety reasons, mostly safety reasons, and all of that. But I would get people in that would just like, they'd like light up the room when they come in and they really wanted to make friends, and that was not the place for them. So think about that and think about like, does their motivation match what they say they want to do? And if it doesn't, don't squander that volunteer. They could be a phenomenal volunteer, maybe just not in that place. My brother, I would put him in a warehouse and say, go organize it. And they would be so grateful. Or I would say, go fix this process. And they would love it. And he would have the best results for you. But if I put him somewhere where it was a social setting, I think they'd hate him and he'd hate them, to be honest. So think about that. So let's talk about each one of them. So purpose-driven volunteers. When I think about purpose-driven, I think about sled dogs. And I don't mean that anyone's a dog, but sled dogs are so purpose-driven. Look at them out there. They're freezing. They're not freezing. They're perfectly happy, but they're out there running in the snow. This is just like my worst nightmare. But here they are. They're focused. They know what they're doing. They're working as a team. Everybody's on the same page. That's it. And so, what do they want? What do our purpose-driven volunteers want? They want meaning. They want mission clarity. They want visible impact. So, like people like my brother would be drawn to this. He got involved with his homeowners association. And it was really interesting because it was in a historic neighborhood. And he researched things that were, in keeping with a time when those homes were built and the neighborhood and things like that. And, how things should be replaced and how planning should happen when they had to, even like plant new trees. It was really interesting, but it gave him meaning. He was able to learn and grow in that role, but it was for a purpose. It was for the betterment of his neighborhood, even though he's an engineer and he's not very social about things. He's not the one that is going to be, organizing the neighborhood picnic, but he would be the one who would help make sure the neighborhood looked uniform, make it look nice, and help people with, you know, living in that kind of an area. So The mission clarity, that's really important for folks. And that first example I talked about with that lady, she was a purpose-driven volunteer. She needed that mission clarity, and when she didn't have it, things kind of went off of the rails. She wanted that visible impact. What her work did was very visible, and she wanted to see that. So here's a few things that really kind of help draw out those purpose-driven volunteers. Here's a few examples of the messaging. Your time helps feed 200 families weekly. There is an impact. You know what the impact is. It's not like, well, hey, we have food to be delivered. That's not good enough for a purpose-driven volunteer. What is the impact? And then be a part of a movement that changes lives. They're going to want to know how it changes lives, by the way. But for like a mentoring program, be a part of a movement that changes lives and helps 250 kids graduate in 3 years or 4 years or something. That is what a purpose-driven volunteer needs in their messaging. And then I always use a butterfly because I think of these people as social butterflies, but they are ones that want belonging, they want teamwork, they want community identity. Those are those thrift shop volunteers. They belonged, they had a little team, they loved each other, they had an identity. That's who they were, the thrift shop volunteers. So, in your message, bring that out. Join a team that feels like a family. And they, in a lot of ways, were a family. They really did spend a lot of time together in the thrift shop and outside of the thrift shop. Meet people who care about you and that you can care about them, and care about the work that we're doing. These are great, little ways to play around with those kind of messages. Again, you can't really imagine an engineer like my brother, who I love dearly, but I can't really imagine him being okay with um, a social thing. It's kind of a waste of time to him. It's like we got to get something done here. Oops. Oh, and then we have our growth-driven volunteers. You know, I love growth-driven volunteers. They're a lot of times they can be young people, they can be people just my age that are looking for something new. Somebody said on here they were listening to a master gardener class. They may be someone of the growth-driven mindset. They want skill building. They may want to step into leadership opportunities. They may be looking for career alignment. And then how do you help them get to the next step? How do you help them try some things out? Our skills volunteer group is a great example of this. And I've had people of all ages in this. And it's interesting what they're able to share with us and provide for nonprofits if a nonprofit is ready. So here's a few of the messages that I like for the growth-driven volunteers. Gain hands-on experience in event management, gain hands-on experience in um, warehouse design or garden design, develop leadership skills while making a difference, and then taking it a step further. Um, Learn how to run a nonprofit, learn how to be a board member, learn how to do strategic planning, whatever it is. Think about that in terms of how you can use growth opportunities to be able to help people answer another problem that they have. And a problem that they might have is that they're looking again for what is their next thing? What is their next step? A lot of young people are in this, especially in the college area, the college time of their life, that in high school, they're looking to like, okay, exposure to different things, exposure to different careers. Do you remember when you were in high school and, you're probably not in your dream job that you thought you would be an X, Y, or Z when you were in high school, and then you're doing something totally different. You never knew about this career, most likely. think about that and think about that with young people and people who are looking for those growth opportunities. So these three motivations, I just picked a few things here. Event staffing, it's a social motivation. Work with a fun, energetic team, that's your message angle. And then data entry, that's something that we're always looking for people to do that. And it seems kind of like it's a hard one, but those are growth people that are needing that kind of skill. Build administrative and tech skills, advocacy. Use your voice to create change, that purpose-driven, that mission-driven work. That kind of helps you kind of think about where those positions can go. And when you're meeting someone and figuring out like where do they fit in, what are their motivations, looking at these three things may be able to help us kind of narrow down like how do we find the best kind of a fit for that person. I am so sorry. Huh, for some reason, I am sorry, I'm having a problem here. I plugged my computer in and now I can't get it to go to the next slide. Katie, are you able to get it to forward to the next slide?
Let's see.
Not really sure why
No,
it's
I'm
doing.
not.
Huh. Well, hold on. Let me do a reshare again. Sorry, everyone. Well, now my computer's saying it's not responding. Okay. Hmm. This is really strange. I don't know. Every time I'm getting on here, it seems like something weird is happening. But let's talk about this. Hopefully it'll let me go to my next one here. Huh. This is just very strange. I am so sorry. Well, let me just stop sharing again. I'm not sure what's going on with my. This is so strange. I've never had this happen before. Okay. So, what do volunteers want most now that we're back on track? So, volunteers want these four things most of all. And if you think about it, I'm sorry, five things. They want flexibility. They want flexibility not only in the hours that they work and ability to juggle all the things that they have going on, but they want flexibility in the work that they're doing. And they want it to be, they want a mix of not just one kind of thing. They need clear expectations. They don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to do the wrong thing. They want to do the right thing and they want to do right by you. They want to have impact stories. So think about that. How are they able to show an impact even after their first day? What did they do? And our role, as I've said this in other ways, is to help them create those impacts. So thinking about it, even in the simplest ways of like, I know this is so simple, but like even picking up a piece of trash off the floor and what it says to those that we serve, that we care about you. We care about where you are here to receive services. We want it to be as nice as it can for you. And they also want that sense of community. And that community is who they're working with, who they're around. It's with the staff, it's with the team that they're with. And then they want skill development. So I always said that there were three things, and this kind of expands on them, but they want to know that someone cares about them. They want to know what they can give and what they're going to get, what they're going to learn, how they're going to grow. And if you can answer all of these, and then again, just like we said in the motivations, three things that volunteers want, but this is clearly what they are. Uh, if you can answer those, that is how you get volunteers to stay with you. So here's some key stats for you as you're thinking about your volunteer recruitment. 72% of volunteers prefer short-term flexible opportunities. 72%. That's the lion's share of them prefer that. 55% of Gen Z volunteers want skills building roles, which makes sense about where they are in their life. 80% want impact stories. They want to be able to tell why and the impact that they made by volunteering. One in four volunteers is motivated by a social connection. And let me go back to the impact stories. When I was younger and my family was younger, I used to bring my little guy. I was a single mom at the time. I used to bring him around, and he used to do a lot of volunteering. And it was interesting. We did, I think it was like a neighborhood trash improvement thing. And I remember we lived in that neighborhood and I was doing it with a school and he was part of that school. And I remember him talking to the neighbor and telling him about why he needed to pick up trash in the neighborhood, like in our yard, because of the watershed and how close we were to the river and what that was going to do to fish and what that was going to do to wildlife and to our drinking water. And I used to think, oh my gosh. And so he had this story that he put together in his mind, but he was showing off to our neighbor why his volunteering for this neighborhood improvement project was such a big deal. So I love that. But he wanted an impact story. So I think he was in the first grade at the time. So even young kids need an impact story. So as we're talking about a message, let's talk about those elements of a clear message. So a strong recruitment message includes a clear role, a specific impact, the time commitment, and how it aligns with their motivations, and then a call to action. So these, take a moment, look at these. You don't have to write these down, but it makes sense when you think about it. So here's a formula that is so simple, but it works so effectively. Do X to create Y, impact with Z time commitment. Perfect for a person who values A. This reminds me of those little things that used to, give me a noun, give me a verb. So here's the example of when you use this formula. Help sort donations to support 300 families weekly. A 2-hour shift is perfect for people who love teamwork. I think you could build on that, but that's just a simple way to use a solid recruitment message. So the next thing is about knowing your audience. Segment your messages by these areas. One, their motivation. You're not going to get a social butterfly to go do a process improvement project where they have to do what my brother would just dig his heels in and love it. Uh, so think about that motivation. Think about the age group. Think about their skill level, availability, and then their digital behavior. Now, honestly, this is kind of funny. My brother would not be caught dead on Facebook, but he's all over LinkedIn and he loves it. If you wanted to go find someone like him, go to LinkedIn, go to your his professional associations, things like that. Go to his company and ask for somebody. I won't tell you where he works, but think about that. That's how you get those kind of people. But people who want more of a sense of community, you're probably going to find them on Facebook. So here, what about this? A storytelling recruitment message. We had storytelling last week, and you can use some of this as a result of that. But think about this too. Um, your storytelling recruitment message. Use your volunteer spotlights. How many of you do that where you spotlight a volunteer? And where does that go? How far out does that go? We would always do one and we tell the story about their impact. And it was always about their impact. And then there would be something at the bottom that, you too could be like, Lucille and volunteer with us. And it worked so well because people saw themselves wanting to make that kind of an impact. So use your volunteer spotlights. Talk about your before and after impact stories. And I love these, talk about like how service solved a problem. What did service do? This is another one. I like these too. Short form videos. When in the age of TikTok and things like that, I think that that is a completely untapped market for us, that we could have volunteers help us create content. We could make fun little videos. We could get people to come in to volunteer just to do that. But I think that TikTok would be a great place to do that. A day in the life narratives. We did this for National Volunteer Week, which this is April, so I think this is fitting. We would have our executives shadow a volunteer and learn their job. And it was a really cool because we'd send something out ahead of time. So they knew kind of what to expect. What they didn't expect was the level of precision and carefulness that our volunteers really invested into their work. And what it did is it really highlighted the respect that our executives have for community service and community impact, that they knew in a very different way. They were up in the C-suite. They don't deal with the families. They don't deal with the patients, but our volunteers do. And they learned how our volunteers did special things to talk to them in a way that built trust. And when in that family member's mind, they were their connection to their loved one who was receiving care. They weren't in front of their loved one at that time, so they didn't really know what was happening other than, a procedure or something. And so they were the caretakers for the families. And so they learned a lot from that, and they learned how hard those jobs are because the family members, and many times, are experiencing this um, in this event very differently than the patient is. And they're much more critical than the patient is usually because, and it makes sense, they're from a safety perspective. They want their loved one to stay alive. And every little thing they're looking at, and they're looking at it in a different way than what we are because we're there every day. And and so this would get conveyed to our executives, and it really was very impactful. So those day in the life narratives, but I love being able to use a day in the life narrative to be able to tell a story to recruit someone as well. So Think about that as a couple of different recruitment avenues. So think about this too. And then I put this siren on here, just a megaphone on here, to amplify our message and to talk about the urgency. So there's these things called behavior nudges. Join 500 volunteers, that mass volunteer need. Commitment cues. Take the first step. Just imagine the possibilities. Urgency. We need 10 volunteers this week. We need them now. Can you step up and help? That kind of thing. And then using multi-channel messaging. And what we mean about this are like use an email, have volunteers do an email campaign to their friends. Hey, I'm sending this out, follow up with a phone call, that kind of thing. Using social media. We've talked about that lots in different recruitment sessions. And then the volunteer platforms. There are so many great platforms out there. We have a few here at the commission you should use. Volunteer Michigan and Michigan Volunteers. Michigan Volunteers has our skills based and then our Board Connect. And then your agency hopefully is in that room I'm sorry, I just was reading this, sorry. Hopefully um, your agency is on in Volunteer Michigan. But then um, I'm sorry, Michigan Volunteers, it may automatically be in there. And then Volunteer Michigan is our Galaxy digital site, which you can recruit volunteers. You can also manage volunteers from that site as well. And then using your community partners, using your Chamber of Commerce, using your library, using your partners in the community colleges and universities and high schools. Think about that, and your churches. Uh, Text message reminders. I love being able to use text messaging to get to a younger group, especially. Kids do not read their emails. So here's the next one. Visual identity matters. Everybody knows what this is. It's the Red Cross, right? Use bright, modern colors. Include real volunteer photos. Keep text minimal in your visual cues, and then use consistent branding. And write down to even the text. Make sure that you understand um, what your organization's rules are about brand identity and things like that. And then don't be afraid to use tools to craft messages. Here's a few of them. Canva, the volunteer management software, whatever one you're using, there's ways to be able to do that in some of those. And then look at your segmentation in your CRMs if you have that in your organization. Looking at like people who have given and then maybe haven't volunteered, or they volunteered and they haven't given, or they've given for a long period of time. Do they have other family members, giving, things like that? You can segment it in different ways like that. And then look at what you have out there that might be a great way to connect with those folks, to bring more volunteerism in. Using your AI assisted writing tools, it's a good way to just get started anyway. So here's some sample messaging. A food pantry assistant, that's the role. Support our food pantry by sorting donations for 2 hours weekly. Your help ensures 150 families receive meals. Great for detailed oriented volunteers. My brother would probably love that. But think about that. Here's another message. This is for a youth mentor. Lead youth activities that build confidence and community. Perfect for volunteers who love mentoring and connection. And then here's some implementation ideas. Build a motivational based volunteer journey map. And what I mean by that is, how do you find them? Who are they? I would usually start with our need. Where are our greatest needs? And then start looking at okay, this is our need. And then that's it about our need. We know what we need. And then how do you find them? How are you going to approach them? What's going to work best? What messaging is it going to work best after you locate a place to connect with them? Do we know somebody who knows these kind of people? And then how do we approach them? So, and then I always like these create A/B test for recruitment. It's just like an A and a B, and then seeing what works better. So you don't have all of your eggs in one basket, that you have a variation of the kind of ads that you're running and where you're running them, just to see what is the most impactful for you, and then what's working well, or what do we have to adjust. And then develop persona-based messaging kits. If you're going after an engineer, I mean, I think they're kind of a tough cookie to crack, but they are and they aren't, because when you give them the right kind of work, you are going to have somebody in your organization who's going to fix all kinds of things. I had a guy who, it's really interesting. He was in his 80s, and he was an engineer. He had a company. He and his brother owned a company. And I think it had something to do with aerospace stuff. Anyway, uh, he was really into process improvement. And I think I told the story about how he told me how much time would be saved if we made the elevators close faster in the hospital. And I don't think, I think he told everybody under the sun what his thought was on this. There's reasons why we can't make the elevator close really fast. We're trying to get people in gurneys on those elevators. But with that being said, a lot of his ideas were phenomenal. He basically re-engineered a lot of the wheelchairs that we all use today, believe it or not, as a volunteer. He got a hold of the company and he goes, these are the parts that wear out. If you just did this, this wouldn't wear out. And, you've got a safety issue here, things like that. And these companies really did pay attention to what he was saying. So think about that. Develop persona-based messaging kits. For him, it would be, do you love to tinker? Well, we love, this is what we need. We need people to help with X, Y, and Z. And then use data dashboards to track your performance. There's nothing worse than putting a lot of effort into something and a lot of money and never knowing if it worked. We had a few things where we did this in the past, and I kind of put an end to it. And I know some people were not real happy with me about that. But there was a thing that we did with placemats in a restaurant. And, you know, I said, well, how do we know that this is working? And it's just a lot of money that we're putting into this, that we're giving these placemats to businesses, restaurants. And do they need this? I mean, should we be doing this? And it never produced anything. We never got one volunteer from it. And then it was proven that that's not where we should go. Fortunately, the things that worked were things that were much less costly. And but it just was very thought. It was a big thought investment. And how do you connect to other people? And how do you get that message out there? So this is the other thing, especially for people who, going back to 30% of people never heard back from the organization after they expressed interest. Creating an automated onboarding sequence is so important. When this happens, this happens. And it should be as automated as possible so nobody falls through the cracks. And the other thing is that every step you should have, I used to just tell them right from the get-go, 4 steps, 4 steps to becoming a volunteer. You do these 4 things and that's it. There's a whole lot of in between, but we would do that. They didn't need to see that. but 4 steps that were visible to that volunteer. And then it was palatable to them to be able to follow those 4 steps. They knew it right ahead of time. Again, clear expectations. And then that way, people who are very process driven, they were attracted to that. The butterflies, oh, they could follow that too. It was very easy, very delivered, like, okay, now this is your next step. And at the end of one step, it told them again what the next step was. So it kept repeating it. And so they knew exactly where they were. And it really did speed up our onboarding time and that time it took from someone to become an applicant to an active volunteer, but by light years. That's probably the best advice I can give you. But here's our next steps. So I would like you to take a moment when you're done here today and think about your current recruiting messages. What gaps do you have between who you're finding and what your needs are? And then take a look. Are there areas where you're not using, um, you're not recruiting volunteers, or you don't have a message or a plan for, an email or a text or whatever it is. And then update those things, update the social media, update your website, and then make sure that your onboarding system is ready. And then begin to track your engagement. If you used something, always ask, how did they find you? Did you see this or ad, or, were you referred by someplace? Know exactly where it is. And even like if you have an application, if you have something where you referred by a professional association, or did you see an ad in a professional, like a Indeed or a LinkedIn, find out what's working. And then you always have the option of asking them if it's too cumbersome in your application to do that. But find easy ways to track that engagement is the point. So I think this kind of starts to it does wrap things up. So those are kind of like some of the most important first step things that I think are so important in creating an engaging message that will attract the kind of volunteers you need. But I want to thank you for being here today. I am going to stop the share and I'm going to stop the recording and ask if you have any questions.